when you're into the second, when you're into the series and you realize like the biggest event of the series happens, text me or DM me.
For which show?
Better Call Saul.
Okay, because I'm about to start that one. I'm finishing up Breaking Bad now. Okay. First time through it, believe it or not.
I'm Peaky Blinders right now. Peaky Blinders.
I'm on season 6. I'm on season 6, Jordan. I can think of like 3 or 4 massive things that have happened.
What episode are you on?
Ooh, episode 1 of season 6 I just finished. So maybe it's we only have one season.
It's in the series. I don't want to give it to you exactly.
Okay, don't give it. Yeah, that's I
when you'll know what I'm talking about.
All right, guys, we'll do the TV guide show after on the side B of tonight's episode. Guys, you think you know Dynasty Fantasy Football until you hear tonight's guest speak. Jordan McNamara, entrepreneur, author, lawyer, Dynasty guru, is in the house with us to talk fallouts from the NFL free agency, rookies, draft picks. What are you doing with them this time of year? What kind of trades are we making? Roster tricks and tips, buys and sells, all of it, guys. All the goodness. Let's get right into it.
Go district, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the and I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
What is up, Fantasyland? We've got Jordan McNamara in the house from Football Guys. You know him from Analytics of Dynasty. I've got my boy Theo, my boy Dan. How pumped are you guys for tonight? We're going to touch on, guys, we're kind of in this awesome Dynasty time, right? We're coming off of the NFL Combine. We've got free agency in full flare, all the real NFL GMs making Dynasty-type moves. And then we've got the NFL Draft. So we've got a ton to talk about tonight. Dan, I know this is one of your favorite guys. He's one of our closest friends of the show. How pumped are you for Jordan tonight?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Jordan's just absolutely one of my favorite follows in Dynasty for many reasons, one of which is just that he's not afraid to say exactly what he thinks out there, which I really appreciate. I like people who are out there and they're a little bit unfiltered, not quite so, always trying to be politically correct or agree with everybody on everything. And, so Jordan's got his own way, and I like a lot of things about the way that Jordan approaches Dynasty. Enjoy his book series and the whole book.
He's got his own approach.
Yep.
Which we're going to touch on tonight, Theo. I know you're pumped. I know you're all over Fantasyland right now. So guys, make sure you're checking out the OG Fantasy. How you doing, buddy? How excited are you for tonight? Talking Dynasty, our favorite topic.
I'm stoked. It's just like a wonderful time of year to be a Dynasty manager. We have the rookie drafts are kind of now on the horizon. And then we have all this constant player movement, our perceptions of guys, our projections for guys for the season. They're continually changing. We're having to react to the news. Lots of trades are going down. We have FFPC cuts this week. You're seeing more and more FFPC trades every single day. I know I'm out here completing a bunch of them. I know Dan and you are as well. So I'm stoked. This is just a great timing to have Jordan back in the district.
Jordan, man, we know you've been in the lab. You've got the Analytics of Dynasty. You've done, I don't know if it's more or less than us, but you've done a million podcasts, dude. I heard the other day how many hundreds of podcasts you've done in the last year, which is awesome. So tell the people that don't know where to find all your goodness, where to find it, what they could find these days, and just how you've been, buddy.
I've been good. I got a couple of observations. One, I am making it a pledge of my life to go on vacation with Dan, because some of the food that he eats on these vacations, I got to experience in my life. Okay, that's the first observation. The second observation, thanks also to Dan for shouting out my heel Jordan. I was joking that earlier in the off season, I'm going with like a very heelish approach to my Twitter persona. So. And then like the next day, some dad from the daycare started following me, and I was like, "Oh man, real life's going to intersect with fantasy." So they just those two observations off the jump. No, thanks for having me, guys. I mean, this is a yearly, fun yearly stop that I always love to make. It's always fun talking with you guys. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we got a fun one tonight. I see 1912 in the chat. Shout out to the chat, Toronto Dave. Guys, if you're not checking out the live show, it's always a party. We've already got a dynasty trade question in there, so remind me. We'll come back to that at the end of the show. We'll touch on that and look at the trade, and give us your 2 cents on the action that you've got going. It's that time of year, guys. It's that time of year. But then, why don't you fire this thing off? Let's get Jordan going, and let's squeeze him for what we can.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jordan, if you don't know, has his own website, Analytics of Dynasty. He also has a series of books he's put out over the past several years. What is it, 5 years now?
This is the fifth annual. The fifth annual. Yep.
There you go. Called the Dynasty Team Building Guide. So I already know a little bit about this because I've ordered it. I'm not done reading it, but I'm well into it. But just kind of give us a little bit of info about what buyers can expect from it.
Yeah, so I've written one of these every year, and I always just call it the Analytics of Dynasty blank year edition. And I was through 4 of them, and I was kind of like, do I want to keep writing these? Am I sort of getting, like, what am I sort of accomplishing? And it was always new topics and stuff, but I was always, kind of like, I have this sort of grand theory in my mind, right? And I sort of implement it, right? I talk about it in podcasts, right? But I've never sort of written it, right? And so I kind of took a step back from a little of the stuff that I was doing in terms of some prior editions and just looked at like the global, just the global dynasty team building, kind of how to do it from top to bottom, and then really in some different situations, right? And so it's basically trying to apply all the lessons that I've learned kind of along the way into one team building. So that's really the deal of it. It's good for anyone. Right. So if you're brand new to Dynasty, if you've been playing it for a long time, there's different stuff for you in there. I take some different views on some stuff, kind of like you guys mentioned. There's some roster construction stuff that's way different than I think a lot of people discuss. I got some interesting math in there that I found that in a couple of leagues where, especially tight end premium, we can probably talk about some different stuff tonight. But like you look at some of those formats, and I just don't think that, if you're in those formats, I don't think people appreciate the math on them and about how basically useless wide receivers are in those formats. And, people continue to load up on them, and it's just a value suck on their roster. So, and in their lineups, you just can hammer those teams, right? You're just getting they're just giving you money. So just kind of that stuff, like don't make those mistakes, and, just mistakes on, it's really hard to pick players, right? But I do think there's some easy things that you can do to just not miss, right? I mean, listen, I'm never going to hit, I'm not going to hit balls, inside 10 feet consistently with my 6-iron, but I can avoid hitting it in the sand trap. I can avoid hitting it in the water, right? And that's kind of a lot of the stuff with AOD on the Dynasty Team Building Guide. It's just sort of, if you just don't do, DDSS, don't do stupid shit, right? That's kind of, I think, a good mantra in Dynasty, and that's a lot of the stuff that we hit on.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Sorry, Dan, I just got to jump in here. That's one of the reasons we wanted him on today, just because he has such a unique approach to Dynasty, but running back specifically, right? And we've seen a lot of movement in the running back realm these last couple of weeks, and we're going to see more as we approach the rookie draft. So I'm interested, and I know our audience are going to love hearing your thoughts on some of the guys that have moved, some of the rookie picks we're going to talk about tonight. Anyway, sorry, Dan, didn't want to cut you off, man. I'm getting excited just hearing Jordan here.
No, absolutely. I was just going to agree with Jordan that don't do stupid shit is basically one of my mantras. It's like the first rule of Dynasty,
Yeah.
to be honest. But a lot of times you can kind of lose sight of what's stupid shit and what isn't because you're focused on the wrong things. So try to keep it simple and don't do stupid shit.
And you see oftentimes this time of year, you're seeing like orphans, people purchasing orphans, entering these new leagues. And, you see people that are putting themselves at like setting themselves back 2 years often. And then you see people really trying to play catch up for bad decisions they might have made this season. And they try to catch up during the off season and they end up putting themselves in a worse bind for the current season and for seasons forward. It's really a tricky time, and you need to handle it well.
Can I just add on that, because that's a great point. And there's two observations I was actually making today, just in just the trade baits I was getting. Right, you get the notifications about trade baits, and they're all the same. Right, it's always low probability rookie bets from 2 years ago. Those are almost always the guys that are on trade baits. Right. And they're especially true when those are the teams that have been taken over as an orphan. And that's the trade bait. Right. It's always low percentage bets that someone made 2 years ago and that they loaded up on them and then they don't hit and then they orphan the team. And now the guy's trying to get, or the guy or gal who takes over the team is trying to get, 60 cents on the dollar, right? You're trying to get out from underneath that. And so, yes, right. I mean, I think that's great. The other thing too, is like people will just absolutely just try to hemorrhage, right? I actually think instead of rebuilding, right, instead of trying to, if your goal is to rebuild your team, instead of taking good players and trading them for depth, take your depth and trade it for good players, right? Like even if you don't have a ton of depth, like that's replaceable, right? That's so replaceable, and I just like that's Dynasty in a nutshell. So like if we could just we could just kind of put this in a bow, right? Don't do stupid shits and trade depth for good players instead of the opposite way around, and you'll be better off. And just we could leave it at that. We'd probably leave people ahead already. You know what I mean? And so I just think what you said, it just really hits home this time of year.
Well, depth are just details, right? You need a structure to build something, whether it's a house or something. You're building a roster. You need your key guys. You need your structure guys. You need your RB1. You need your QB1. You need your wide receiver studs. So if you don't have those, there's no point in adding all this depth to your team. And I think that's what you guys are getting at here. Guys are just collecting, picks and youth and upside, but don't have the base for a proper structure that's going to be competitive, whether that is this year or next. And like you said, Theo, sometimes that puts them back 2-3 years or trading away the wrong pieces, right?
And Jordan made a really great point on acquiring top quality assets. I think especially like we have a lot of listeners who play FFPC. All the four of us play FFPC. Getting those really, really impactful big time players in your lineup, especially with the roster requirements of the FFPC, is like the end goal. I think that oftentimes you see people that say, I'm willing to trade this player that's worth $1 for maybe 3 players that are worth 33 cents, and 50 cents. Whereas some of those trades where you trade 3 50-cent pieces, you lose the calculator trade, and you end up getting an elite asset, trading maybe 3 perceived RB2s/RB3s with like wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3s, and you get that true wide receiver 1, RB1 type for those 3 kind of guys. Those are the trades you always go back. Maybe once in a while you lose those, but when you win those massively. And I think that's just another approach this time of year that you see people making mistakes, just trying to take on 4 guys that really have no path to being like a 18, 20 point per game guy in a PPR league.
Yeah. And if you're just, if you're not sure about this concept, all you need to do is take a look around and see what's being offered in basically every Dynasty league right now. It's all depth. I mean, people are swapping depth. It's like back in elementary school when we used to pitch pennies. I mean, it was like a worthless way to pass the time. And everybody's trying to get underneath their their roster cuts in FFPC. So there's something of that. But the point is that depth is available all the time. I mean, if you want to go out and get a Kenneth Gainwell, you can go out and get a Kenneth Gainwell pretty much any time of year, and it's not going to cost.
You mean the
much.
starting
So-
running back for the Philadelphia Eagles? That kind of thing?
Yes. And I have picked up a couple shares of Kenneth Gainwell, but I mean the point
Smart
is,
man.
yep.
Smart man.
It's it's depth until it isn't.
Right.
And I know this is a concept that Jordan wants to get into. But that's kind of a key focus of what you do in Dynasty, isn't it, Jordan? Plays like that.
100%. And it's funny because I was writing this and it kind of I just kind of had like a eureka moment. And it was like one of those things where like I have this concept called warp, which we've talked about before, but it's basically wins over replacement player. And what you see is like they're all really close until they're not. And then there's a huge gap, right? So, so at the top, right, there might be in a given year, there might be, I don't know, between 15 and maybe 25 guys that are winning you a game over replacement. And then it becomes so flat after that, right? It just becomes so flat. And so the difference between and that's like one of the things I've most appreciated, kind of what we talked about going to elite players. And while early on in my career, I was super worried about missing those trades, but now I'm I can't make enough of them because what you realize is that, 2 wide receiver twos, or really 2 running back twos. I'll give you an example, right? Dobbins and Akers, I gave for McCaffrey. And 5 years ago, Jordan would have never done that. Okay. Because this was before last year. 5 years ago, Jordan would have never done that because he would have been scared of the depth and, what happens if McCaffrey gets hurt. I got these 2 guys that could make up. But what you realize is the odds of those 2 guys, one of them hitting bigger than McCaffrey is almost, based on their ADP, outside of injury, it's almost impossible for them to do it. And, okay, so you have 2 of them, but now it still isn't increasing your probabilities that much. And, right, you've taken one guy out of your lineup and now you got to figure out a solution on a week-to-week basis, right? So you're just kind of sinking yourself. And so I've started to make a lot more of those trades. And then what you realize is an elite running back and a replacement player is a lot more valuable and a lot more productive in your lineup than 2 guys that are running back twos, right? The math is just right. And again, I am not just rostering replacement running backs on a week-to-week basis. I'm rostering above replacement running backs and getting them into my lineup. That's a whole nother story. But you just realize that the math always works in that direction, right? And what I people, hey, how do I flesh out depth? That's a problem you worry about later on. You can always trade for Tyler Lockett in season. You can always trade for Mike Evans. You can always trade for this year's Adam Thielen. You can always make that trade. That trade's always available to you because there's going to be some team that's falling out of contention that, that's the first place they're going to go is to old wide receivers and say, I can't roster these guys long-term if I'm rebuilding. That is the first place that they will go. And so those players are always available to you, right? Those are depth plays that are always available to you. And so, mortgaging from that depth to get really difference-making guys, the math really hit me in the face when I was looking at it this year because, right, the win over replacement thing, if you kind of just think about it, a replacement team would win about 3 games, right? And so if you have, right, 3 or 4 guys that can win you a game and a half over replacement, you're a 9-win team. It's not that complicated, right? Get those guys, right? And I had it this year where I had Mahomes, and a lot of things went wrong. I wrote about it in the book. A lot of things went wrong. But I had Mahomes, I had Jacobs, and I had Eckler. And I won a championship. Basically, just hemorrhaging everywhere else. But I just had those 3 guys that basically carried me to 9 wins, right? Because I was proper on the roster construction. I was playing, a little bit above replacement level at the other spots. And I was just hammering people with my 3 best players, right? And that's a winning formula. And I think that people way too often sacrifice that.
I think that was a great point you made, Jordan, on the Dobbins and Akers. And you're talking about them specifically as players, but in kind of a royal sense.
Yeah.
The perception that youth is going to get better and the perception that these RB2s, because they happen to be a little bit younger, they have that path where you're able to turn it into a absolute producer. I think we see people making that mistake time in, time out, where we have to have respect to the age apex. We don't want to take on older assets, but at the same time, these 26-year-olds and 27-year-olds, there's certain managers just want to get rid of them, and it's just been proven time,
especially at the running back position.
Yeah, and I'll give Jordan props because you were on the Josh Jacobs train when it was kind of cool to get rid of Josh Jacobs, and you had talked up him as an asset. It's like people want to ignore the previous production and the current situation of players in. Like right now, it's not that hard to get Nick Chubb in a lot of leagues. And Nick Chubb has a path that I think if we all had to bet on who scores more fantasy points this year, Nick Chubb or a number of these year 2 and year 3, year 4 running backs, I think we're all going to go with Chubb. But I think that those kind of guys just become so much more affordable. And those younger backs don't, more often than not, if they haven't done it in their first or second year, it's just not going to happen.
Totally. And I have one of the things I did this year that I always wondered that question, right? Like, what does the rookie season tell us, right? And I think it tells us more than we ever give it credit for, right? Like, and there's some stuff too that I even can go back and just the Amon-Ra St. Brown experience from last year, right? And you looked and you saw it in a very short sample size. It was 6 or 7 games. There was him and basically no Hawkinson and no Swift. I think maybe someone else was banged up too. So this would have been 2021, his rookie year. And he went just absolutely absurd down the stretch. I think he was a top 5 wide receiver to close this. I mean, it was, his metrics were prime, but they were Justin Jefferson level metrics. It was crazy. And you looked at it and you're really? Again, I'm not a day 3 wide receiver guy. I'm not that's not, I wasn't in on him pre-draft, but I came back and I started looking at it, and it's one of those things where, okay, what's that tell us? Right. And it's amazing, especially at tight end. This is especially true at tight end. It's true at wide receiver. Running back can be a little bit more difficult because the situations can change a little bit more. But at wide receiver and tight end, if they're not good in their rookie season, it's a bad bet. Right? I mean, and you can look at some key metrics, right? I've been on the George Pickens was pretty bad as a rookie train. Trey McBride is one that I'm if I can get what I paid for him, I would 100% do that because his metrics are god awful last year in Arizona. So those are just really easy things to kind of look at. And then from a global perspective, you realize all right, the hit rates on these guys isn't that high. Right. And so if I can really turn it into a 1 year of Nick Chubb is worth a lot more than I think people give it credit for. Right. You're not going to probably outproduce that from a late first round rookie pick. On average, Nick Chubb's going to beat that. Right. Probably in 1 year. He's probably going to beat it over the next 2 years. He's a substantial bet. He's a substantial favorite, right, to beat whatever that pick produces. So, I think pricing those things is really, really important. And I think the team building guy does that. And it's something I've gotten a lot better at because I was sort of in this trap of just building through depth, youth guys. I wanted to have, I wanted to win Dynasty Bikini season, which is from between January. It's like Dan's vacation season. Right. So it's from January through August. Right. And it's the Twitter, who wins the Twitter modeling contest. And so that's the Dynasty Bikini season. And then what you realize is that those teams are built on, it's a house of cards when you start playing in September, October, and November.
So for you, it's less of George Pickens, the player, and more the profile of what George Pickens did as a rookie versus history.
Yeah, so I just look at him and George Pickens is an easy one for me. He's actually, and it's funny because I looked at him and I was I don't like the stats, and people kept telling me to go back and look, and it actually forced me to. Again, I like to listen to other opinions, so I might be a little off the reservation sometimes with some of my opinions, but I like listening to other people's opinions because it gives me different things to look at. So actually one of the things with George Pickens that I found was super predictive. Okay. Is so it's a stat called targets per route run. Okay. It's basically what percentage of, if you run a route, if you're a receiver on a drop back pass, right, and you run out into the field to go try and catch a pass, right, you run a route. how many of those routes are you targeted on? Okay, it's a very simple metric. It's not too complicated. George Pickens is extremely bad at that. Okay, he is last year he was targeted on 14.5% of his routes he was targeted on. Okay, so that's a pretty low number. To give you an idea, that's about in his career, that would be about let me see here, let me get it right here. It's about a 15th percentile. It's a 30th percentile type outcome. Okay, so that's well below the average wide receiver. Okay, that's well below the average day 2 wide receiver. It's well below the average second round wide receiver. Okay, so that already you're on a negative track. Okay, and then also what I learned was, when you start diving into that, what people really like about George Pickens is the stuff that's very attractive on Twitter, right? It's very attractive in the highlights. It's memorable because he can make spectacular plays. The problem is we weight those a lot higher than we weight, a simple Amon-Ra St. Brown crosser, right? That's never going to make a highlight. That's never going to be anything that sort of makes the rounds on Twitter. And no one's going to be like, look at this superstar player. George Pickens makes the emotionally impactful play. And as a result, we remember that. And as a result, we overweight that. But what you realize with him is two things. He doesn't get open. Okay. And he's extremely reliant on contested catches. Okay. And what is the problem with George Pickens is you're buying at the high end of his variance because he was the best contested catch guy in the league last year. And that's like one of the most variable stats. It doesn't predict year over year. And he was one of the worst guys at getting open, what I call an open route, which is if you're not targeted on a contested route, right? If you're not targeted on and any route that you run that's not a targeted route, how often are you targeted on those other routes? He's like a bottom 5 percentile guy. So, and that's extremely predictive year over year. That's something that stays very, very true. So he's very good at the things that are propping him up and cost are the things that are difficult to repeat, and the things that are critical to repeat, he's really bad at. So that's the hallmark of an overvalued wide receiver, in my opinion.
But where do you factor in? So I will say that for me, Pickens is not a sell, not necessarily a buy. The teams that I have him, I'm okay with, and in terms of best ball, I think he's fine where he's priced. But he hit 50 and 800 as a rookie, so it's not like he was completely irrelevant. And then when you factor in the situation of high draft capital guy under Mike Tomlin, those guys have traditionally taken a step forward in year 2. How do you factor in this? Do you factor in the team situation when you're looking at these sort of players? Like for Tomlin, Claypool, Freiermuth, Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Martavis Bryant, and James Washington, all those guys combined saw an increase of 21.5 receptions from their rookie year to their second year. The only one that the productivity and PPR points went down was Claypool. And that's because, he saw the same amount of targets, but the touchdowns went way down. So don't you think that there's a little bit of something we should factor in, like the team situation with it? Or do you think that gets a little more overrated?
I didn't catch the guys that you mentioned. Who were the guys that you mentioned that went up?
Everyone except for Claypool. Yeah. Deontay Johnson, Pat Freiermuth, and I threw Freiermuth in there even though he's a tight end. These are all receivers that had draft capital under Tomlin.
Yep.
James Washington, Martavis Bryant, Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, Pat Freiermuth, and then I threw Claypool in there. Claypool's the only one that went down, and he only went down by 4 receptions from year 1 to year 2.
Yeah, I'm just trying to grab it really quick. One of the problems that I have with George Pickens is it was on exceedingly high volume. Okay, like when you look at him, he was among the league leaders. I believe only Garrett Wilson ran more routes than him last year. I'm just checking.
He was 16th in route runs.
He did a lot of cardio. He did a lot of cardio out there in the Kenny Pickett offense.
That he did.
Yeah, he did. And he ran 580 routes. Only Garrett Wilson ran more routes than him as a rookie. So already you're looking at a guy that was very highly involved. He was involved on 90.5% of his routes. Again, that led rookies last year. Okay, so already you're in a spot where you're like, okay, is this a scenario where he can really take a leap? Deontay Johnson's been in terms of getting targets, he's been a very high level guy at that, right? Again, generating targets, which is the most important stat, right? Everything else, right? If you're looking for wide receivers, right, and you know nothing else, right, you should honestly, we try and do too much, right? All we should really be trying to do is predict the targets, because your targets predict 85% of your points. Okay, that's like the biggest correlation you'll ever find in all of Dynasty fantasy football or fantasy football in general, and probably the NFL at all, right? Like that's the most correlated stat that you'll find. And so you really need to just be hunting guys that will get those. And so the problem with Pickens is, how do I ever see 120, 130 targets? Because he doesn't get targeted at a high enough rate. And this isn't a spot where, I mean, he showed us a lot last year, and it was a lot of not good. And so, it was a lot of, like you said, wind sprints, and honestly, like you can look at some of the metrics for Kenny Pickett, and he was probably like right about the median quarterback last year, right? I mean, if the argument for Pickens is that he needs an elite situation to be good, right? That's not a good argument, right? That's not a good argument. Like if that is what you need from a player, that's not a player you should be in the business of.
Yeah, I can understand what you're saying. I do think that there's you say he was the median of the quarterbacks, but we do see quarterbacks improve from year one to year two consistently in fantasy football. So I do think it's an interesting one. I think it's more of the Pickens profile is something maybe you dislike more than Pickens the player, is kind of my takeaway from your Pickens analysis.
Yeah. The other thing too is, like, you look at Juju Smith-Schuster. Juju Smith-Schuster increased by 260 routes his first year to second year. Like you look at Freiermuth as well. He went he ran 40 more routes, which was he did take a jump in targets per route run. But like the key point to this is, like, he needs to take an extraordinary jump. Right? This isn't even like some natural progression for Pickens. Like he needs to, because there's a couple of things that are going to happen to him. Number one, you can't expect him to be as good at a contested catch, which is where he made so much of his value last year. And right, it's a small sample size thing that isn't correlated year over year. So you got to be very careful about making that bet. And two, you need to be very careful about making bets on guys that aren't going to get volume, because you can love him, like you can like the profile. And again, I thought he was fine as coming out as a day two guy. Like I didn't have any, like I was just sort of neutral on him. I'm not really big in the business of day two wide receivers coming out anyways, right? I kind of make that judgment after the rookie season a lot of times, unless it's like some very specific bets that I want to make. But so I didn't really have a strong take on him. But you start looking at this and you're like, I just want to sort of be aimed in the right direction, and I want to be aimed at guys that could have the chance to get a lot of targets. Like him over Christian Watson, I think is like heresy, right? Because you look at a guy like Christian Watson, and even on like a small sample size, he was hurt, he was banged up, but like down the stretch, he had very Amon-Ra St. Brown rookie season type of production down the stretch, right? And it wasn't. Again, I think it's really hard for guys to do that aren't good. Right? It's because we've seen that, right? We've seen the Mecole Hardman's in a great landing spot, right? We see all these guys, they're in great landing spots, and they don't produce. It's extremely hard to do elite things for guys that aren't really good. And like Christian Watson's one of those, and we just haven't seen it with Pickens. And so I don't want to be like, I think 580 routes tells you a lot. I think it tells you a lot. He was basically a below average second round wide receiver that he's propped up because he ran the second most routes of any rookie. And
I'll agree with you on that. I'm on Watson over Pickens as well. I don't think you can pull that trade off in that many of these leagues. Watson, like you said, was a top 10 wide receiver over the second half of the season. So yeah, it's awesome production from Watson.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just looking up on Keep Trade Cut just to have something real quick to look at. Christian Watson and George Pickens are back to back as far as wide receivers go. And also in that neighborhood, Ayuk, Burks, Jerry Jeudy, so right around that neighborhood. So Jordan, if you were flipping Pickens, let's say you accidentally ended up with Pickens on your roster, and you woke up today and you realized, oh no, what kinds of trades would you be making to flip him for an asset you feel better about?
Yeah, I'm always aiming up, right? So I'm always the consolidate up guy, kind of like we talked about before. Like I think George Pickens is a great avenue to go and acquire an elite player, right? Because be on the flip side of what we talked about not doing, right? We talked about don't package elite guys for packages, right? For future production, for young guys, for depth, right? You be the person that does the opposite of that, right? George Pickens is a great avenue to sell to somebody that wants to be, George Pickens and a quarterback and another piece and go get an elite quarterback, right? That's George Pickens is a great guy to go and sort of consolidate up the board, would be my thought, right? Especially in Superflex, like I'm spending a lot of my time trying to get the two best possible quarterbacks that I can make, right? And that's kind of the trade that I'd be aiming with. If I had to sort of shoot down, right? If I want to sort of what I consider arbitraging down, can I get Deontay Johnson plus? What's my plus? I'm interested in that. I think because again, the other thing that you take into consideration is at the same cost, a wide receiver that has done it before, and by done it before, I mean produced a top 24 seasonal finish. And the odds go up for guys that have done it multiple times, but just take one top 24 seasonal finish versus a guy that has not done it before, has not produced a top 24 finish at the same ADP. The guy with the top 24 finish on his resume going to massively outproduce the guy that hasn't. Okay. And the reason for that is because we insulate for age, and it props people so far up that it's like 2 or 3 rounds of ADP different, right? We prop up young guys and give them this big age premium, and they get beat by the guys that have been long-term productive. And I think that's kind of an easy trick to pull on people, and that's available. Those things are available to you.
Right. Exactly. That's the classic Jacob Rickroad analysis of wide receivers. If you've done it once, you're much more likely to do it again and keep doing it than if you've never done it at all.
100%. That's 100% true.
Let's maybe switch gears a little bit, but keep the conversation similar, Jordan. Looking at rookie picks, you've talked about running backs, you've talked about these receivers. Looking specifically with draft picks, are you still kind of upgrading? Are you looking to consolidate and move up in these drafts? Are you looking to use your picks as just chips in order to upgrade within your roster? How do you manage rookie picks, your dynasty rookie picks this time of year, as we get closer to the NFL draft?
Yeah, 1912 Fantasy in the comments asked, where do I get the target route data from? It's all derived from PFF data. So they don't give it to you specifically, but I just download it and sort of run it. And it's just a formula. Just take the targets divided by the routes run, and that gives you the number. So what am I doing with picks? So it's funny, if we get into some in-depth rookie pick discussion about specific rookies, you're going to be astonished at how little I've paid attention to this class. I will say I actually went to a pro day today. So I was a credentialed member of the media at Syracuse University's pro day today.
How did you like Sean Tucker?
I spent a ton of time, a ton of effort getting there, and then he didn't even work out. And so
no way.
I wish I'd known that before. Yeah, I spent all this time and effort. They denied me the credentials. I went through. I was super adamant on getting the credentials. I showed up there, blacked out my whole afternoon, and then I was like, wait a second, I don't see someone. I thought he had run, but because the person ran without a shirt on, I couldn't see. I'm terrible at faces. I can't see that far. And so I'm looking, and I was like, I don't think that guy ran mid 4.4s. And I was like, I don't think that's Sean Tucker. And so then I looked over, and I was like, that definitely, he definitely put on a number that's not Sean Tucker's number. And I went over to the press guy, and I was like, is he not working out? He's like, no, he's not working out. Medical reasons. I was like, come on. I spent all this time.
I saw your tweet. I got all excited. I thought we were going to get inside scoop there. That's too bad. Yeah. That's too bad.
I was all excited too. He's like, do you usually interview people? I was like, never. I was like, I'm just there to watch him run. That was going to be the big jump start to my rookie draft. But one of the things that I don't do is I don't spend a lot of time like early on in the rookie drafts, what I consider the rookie draft season, from like January through April, right? I don't really spend a lot of time from like January through like free agency studying rookies because a couple of things. Number one, I think it's a low probability bet. Those things change a lot too, right? And so what we kind of understand from early on, right, ultimately the thing that matters most is your draft pedigree. And so I think like by the time you get to the end of April, right, you'll know that better and have a really much better way of valuing players, right? So I am at this point of the offseason, I'm basically sprinting to kind of catch up. But I understand that really the thing that I care most about is going to be draft pedigree. With that comes a couple of things. One, and again, this has been a thing that I've done in the past, so I might even be erring to the side of like doing it too much, but I think it's been a very successful historical strategy, so I'm really trying to lean into it, which is I don't try and pick favorites, and I'm stopping picking favorites among rookies, especially at wide receiver. I think it's a terrible bet, right? Historically, we as a dynasty community, ADP, if you look at first round wide receivers, a couple of critical things have been true. Among the first round wide receivers, the order of which they've gone off in the NFL draft has not been predictive of future success. Also, dynasty ADP has not been predictive of their success. So what does that mean? It means all the time and all the energy that we spend studying rookies in the lead up to the rookie draft does no better than random amongst picking those guys. So to me, I don't want to spend a ton of time and energy in a place where I don't think we can really make a valuable difference, a predictive difference, right? Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson is a pretty good reminder of that every time I start studying rookies and saying like I want to pick this guy as wide receiver one. So that's one of the things that like we've consistently seen as being true. And so to me, the angle is there's a couple of spots where you might want to go up the board. Right, if I can land 101, it's going to be a first round running back. It's going to be the only first round running back. I'm in. Right, that's a good bet. So Bijan Robinson, like going to one and getting Bijan Robinson makes a lot of sense. But otherwise, like I don't want to pick the first. Like if there's going to be top 10 quarterbacks, if there's going to be 3 or 4 of them, I don't want to pick one. I don't want to pick 3 or 4. Right, because I don't want to trade from. I don't want to pay what it's going to cost me to pay to move from quarterback 4 to quarterback 1, because those guys, again, among that group, that performs randomly as well. Top 10 quarterbacks that perform randomly. The order of which they come off the draft, the order of which we've picked them in Dynasty hasn't been predictive. And so when you start looking at these things, you realize like, all right, what direction do I want to make my bet? I'd much rather make 2 bets than 1. Is a lot of kind of how I come down on it. So if I'm sitting at like 103 and it's going to be quarterback 1, I'm trying to sort of bail out of there, see if I can't get a quarterback and another asset, see if I can't get another, trade down and get one of the later quarterbacks and get a proven asset or another pick or something like that, where I'm taking multiple bets. So that's kind of the way that I look at that. Again, then I kind of am like in the second round, I'm really looking like, is there a first round wide receiver that fell to the second round? I'm interested in that. As a general rule, like that's someone you should take. Is there round 2 running backs that fall into the second round? Like that's something you really want to take. First round quarterbacks that fall into that range, probably not going to happen this year, but maybe it has happened in the past. That's something you want to take. So that's kind of what I'm looking for generally. I'm just kind of looking for profile players at certain spots.
Dan has had a similar strategy. Like Dan hit on Mac Jones in Dynasty because of his price. And how Mac Jones was able to, he ended up returning a significant investment if you got him in Superflex, kind of where he was. Do you think this year with this class, whoever QB4 of the big 4, provided they all go in the top 10, becomes maybe a player you're a little more interested in? A Will Levis at like, let's say the 106 in a Superflex draft instead of having to use that 103 on an Anthony Richardson. You might be more inclined to take the discount.
Yeah, and the other thing too is like, so yes, I think Pickett was a good example of kind of that Mac Jones bet. Like last year, I was kind of sitting in the middle of the first round in a couple of spots, right? I kind of tried to avoid the bet because I didn't have a great, for a lot of the reasons I just said, I didn't really have a strong opinion, right? I was just like, all right, I know the play is to either go up and sort of get to Kenneth Walker because he's different than basically every other. It was for me last year. It was Hall, it was London, and then it was Kenneth Walker tier break, and then there was like 6, 7, 8 guys that I was like, I mean, if you threw them, like if you just sort of randomly picked the names, like I couldn't really argue with the order that you would put them. And so I ended up coming down and looking at it, and I was like, all right, do I want to take like a wide receiver? Like I wasn't firmly convinced on Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave. Like they've turned out to be really good. But I was so I sat there a couple of times in the middle of the first round, and I was like, I'm in a super flex, right? The only guy that's going to be a quarterback asset in this draft is going to be Kenny Pickett. And I said, I don't think Kenny Pickett's going to be a superstar. I don't think Kenny Pickett's going to be, he's not going to be the next coming of Mahomes. And I don't think he's going to be like a Josh Allen level producer, right? He might be Kirk Cousins at his best. I said, but what, the question that I kept asking myself was, what's the most scarce thing available to me? And it was Kenny Pickett. And so, again, if I could have it back and knew what I knew now, I would have taken Olave, right? I would have taken Olave over Pickett, but I didn't. And so I kind of said, what's the best odds I can do to be in a position next year where even if I don't love Kenny Pickett, I can trade him for a player that I'm really going to love. And I said, I think I can, the thing we know about quarterbacks is they basically get a year, right? You kind of get a year of forgiveness. If people will always always be someone that wants to buy the young quarterback. And you can put Kenny Pickett in a deal with picks and get an upgrade, right? So, and the other thing we know is there's always going to be a discount quarterback profile, right? So there's typically 1 or 2 of those available. So, Herbert to an extent this year, like Dak, pre-Cooks, I think. Some of these other guys have been, Russell Wilson. Like there's discount quarterbacks available to you that are easier to make typically, with a quarterback in the deal. So if I'm sort of sitting there at 106, 107 and like Levis is quarterback 4, or it's going to force me to take like wide receiver 2 or 3, give me the quarterback asset and super flex, and like I can figure it out down the road. That's kind of the angle there. I do think Levis is a distant 4th, but for all the reasons that we said, like we're like the NFL spends millions and millions and millions of dollars and still gets it horribly wrong in the top 10. Like I'm not going to get it better than they are. So just kind of take the asset.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to go about it, and just kind of as a specific example, JD and I a couple of years ago in one of the leagues we run together, we took Zach Wilson in the rookie draft, even though we both kind of hated him. Me probably even more so than JD, but I was just like, this is probably the asset that's going to hold the value the best right here. And, JD was in it and with me on that. He's like, yeah, and he might even be good, which might have happened. I mean, I could have been wrong, and he could have been good. So, it kind of allowed us to hold him for a little while, and then as soon as we were kind of like, well, he's sure not looking like a good quarterback, but we were still able to trade him for a lot because of the fact that he was young. He was the clear starter for the Jets, all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of an easy pick to make.
For sure, and you even see that like right now with Fields, right? Like there's plenty of reasons to be skeptical about Fields as a passer, but the market still like you can sell Fields for. Like you could put Fields in a Mahomes package, you could put Fields in an Allen package. Like you can go way up in terms of security. Like those things are available. Right, they are absolutely available, and you can have like all the skepticism in the world about Fields as a passer, and someone will still be on the other side of that, right? Because they want youth, they want like all the way we started off this conversation. There's still like we're in the minority of opinions, I think a lot of times, and so there's almost always a buyer for those types of. I mean, honestly, Zach Wilson, like last year's situation looked pretty good. Again, he just wasn't good, but like it looked really, it ultimately looked good. They did everything right around a quarterback. He just failed.
Right.
So, but there was people that were willing to buy into that for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And to be clear, we actually sold Zach Wilson off sometime during his rookie year.
Good.
We didn't even wait around for last year. But I think Fields is a perfect example too, because people are willing. They like that youth. Like Fields plus what? Fields would get you Dak Prescott plus what? Is pretty much the way it goes right now. And, a year ago, it would have been, Dak was the clearly superior asset, and a year from now, it might be Dak is the clearly superior asset. It's kind of a narrow path that Fields has to tread to retain all of that value that he's got right now.
Yes. We also like the fact that Justin Fields had the second most rushing yards of all time for a quarterback, though, Dan.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And the thing is, there is that, but he also has to succeed as an NFL quarterback, because if he doesn't do that, like if he turns into some weird version of Tim Tebow or whatever, it's just not going to last. They're going to quickly move on, and and he'll become, just either a marginal quarterback that kind of gets passed from team to team, as he works his way into becoming a backup, or he just won't get the chances anymore.
That Panthers first rounder that they have should also be very valuable if they needed to make a pivot to quarterback. One thing I thought Jordan said that was super interesting was these wide receivers that go in the first round that fall to the second round. Dan's been really good with this as well. Just your thoughts, and I know you haven't dove as much into these prospects, but it seems like there's kind of a disconnect with Jalen Hyatt right now, where Jalen Hyatt looks like he's going to have very good NFL draft capital. Some people think he could even be the first wide receiver selected in the NFL draft, but rankers have him quite low. And even if he lands perfectly in the NFL draft, the ship has already left the port. Like, he's never going to leap all of these guys. Do you think he would become a guy that dynasty managers should be targeting if, like, he's a top 15 selection and you're getting him with like the 110, 111 in a non-superflex format?
I get my names confused, and again, I haven't been far enough along. Hyatt's the kid from Tennessee, right?
Yep. Tennessee, yep. And I
get him and Flowers confused for reasons that I can't quite understand. So he's like plus 800 to go 101, or sorry, excuse me, plus 800 to go wide receiver one. Yeah, I'm like pretty interested in that, because like if you look at classes where there hasn't been a clear guy, like a clear, like a top, like a prototypical kind of wide receiver one that goes like in the top 10 picks of the NFL draft, it's been a really good bet to pick the fast guy, right? Like if there hasn't been kind of a clear guy that you think's like a prototypical wide receiver one, pick the fast guy, right? It's been like, you've seen that, like Ruggs, like even in that class where there were some prototypical guys, like, it's been the fast guy. So I do think that's a pretty an interesting one, right? And it wouldn't shock me, right? It wouldn't shock me to see, him be the wide receiver one in this class in terms of pedigree. That wouldn't shock me at all. And so, I think like the disconnect there is like if people like Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle were available in the second round, like just take them. Like, just last year. Yeah, just take them. Like, and again, like the base rate's good. Like, and it doesn't change. Like, one of the things I look at a lot is like just what the understanding the hit rate of player profiles is. So like first round wide receiver, it's about 55% chance they ever produce a top 24 seasonal finish. And it drops as they don't do it, right? Like year 3, it becomes pretty critical for players. But early on, like that number's kind of random throughout the position, throughout the first round guys, right? It's not higher really earlier in the draft. And so, like, again, if we're going to try and predict it better than the NFL, right? Pedigree is really important, but it's tough to sort between the guys. If you're getting a half a round discount, like, yeah, I'm all in, right? Like, I'm all in on that at that price, because again, maybe that allows me to take 2 shots, right? Can I take, is there can I trade from, 107 to, whatever, 201 and add a piece that's actually meaningful in that move down? Chances are probably yes, right? In a rookie pick situation, and grab a first round wide receiver in a class that I'm not really convinced on guys outside of Jackson Smith and Jigba, which I know is already a bad bet to make.
It's the Jahan Dotson versus David Bell scenario last year, where David Bell Twitter was ecstatic about the third round landing spot and kind of talked themselves up. And Jahan Dotson, people had kind of a little bit of take lock, and he certainly good luck making that trade these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
No
That's
kidding.
that you can't. You'd never do that, right? Like, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're drafting a guy in a rookie draft, where you're drafting a guy that went a round later than another guy at the same position, right? So again, that's an even more extreme example because it's 2 rounds different, which is substantial. Like the odds, like David Bell is about half the odds that Jahan Dotson is just as a random. Yeah, he's a random 3rd round guy. Jahan Dotson's a random 1st round guy. It's about half the odds, right? So if you ever find yourself making a bet like that, like stop yourself, like, put down your mouse, right? Step away from the computer, put your phone down, like be super conscious of what you're doing before you push that button to make that pick.
And I had a question for you and Dan and JD. Like you've been big on Drake London. I love Drake London right now. With respect to this draft class, what pick would you offer in a non-superflex league to get Drake London right now?
I'd pay 102 for him.
The landing spots. What was that?
I'd pay 102 for him.
102. What about you,
Okay.
Dan?
In a 1 quarterback league?
1 quarterback FFPC league.
Yeah, that's probably about right. I mean, I 102, 103, right in there. What about you, JD?
You're mute,
You're
JD.
unmuted.
You're on mute.
Still
Well,
muted.
I'll say that
Even double
I
tapped it, like not only a rookie, but like a real amateur rookie. Double tapped it. I think the only thing you're giving up that you're not giving up for London from this class, like you guys said, is that 101 for Bijan, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can make an argument. I think it's interesting because, like, I can make an argument that I'd rather have the 102, but I think that if you offer the 103 right now for Drake London, without knowing the landing spots, I think you're getting Drake London in a lot of those deals.
Well, the 102 is just more liquid, like it's just you can move it more. But if you really like London and you have the 102, I mean, now is a good time to make that move, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I just think it's very interesting because, like, I'm very big into London, but I think that there's a little bit slight of a disconnect of what he is in Dynasty versus what these early rookie picks are. I just don't get the feeling that you don't see a whole lot of Drake London trades. People are still hesitant to move him, but I think when it came down to it, I think you could absolutely make the 102 for London, and you probably can make the 103 for London in most FFPC leagues.
But I think anytime you have a young receiver with that many questions at quarterback, I think that's probably the biggest hesitation with London, I would imagine, because I mean, Dan loves his narrow target trees, and that was definitely one narrow one out there in Atlanta between Pitts and London. So you think they're going to get better this year? I don't know. Ritter, I've got him as a QB2 on a triflex somewhere, and I'm hoping he's something, but you got to hope they bring someone else, or I don't know. But I think that's probably the biggest reason, the biggest hesitation with the young receiver, to me, is only the quarterback question.
Yeah, for sure. And I got to pin Jordan down on one thing that he just kind of casually tossed off there, and then we're going to let JD make a plug for us. But say again about JSN, Jordan. You think he's a very bad bet, right?
No, he would be my wide receiver 1.
Okay.
Right? As I sit here right
Maybe
now,
I
again,
misunderstood what you said.
with the caveat that I haven't studied everyone. Like I have a really hard time putting any profile over his. Just
Okay.
with this amount of study. Again, I haven't watched them, but we know the things that are important. Break out really early and to a high level, and like that's the most predictive thing at the wide receiver position. That plus draft capital, like that's. Again, if I didn't know anything else, right? I kind of go with the philosophy of like, if I could kind of give my wife a couple of things, she doesn't know a wide receiver from, defensive end. And I just told her kind of like what to follow, right? Those would be the 2 things. And she could probably like not implode her team. And so that would be the thing that I would do, with the caveat of like picking the wide receiver 1 has been very difficult. Like that hasn't been like Corey Davis had like almost a bulletproof profile. Like the profiles that go up there are usually pretty.
But he was
good.
a senior. He was a senior though.
Sure. Yes. But like the order of which these guys have gone off hasn't been predictive. And so if you're kind of in a spot where you're like, okay, I really, really, really like the wide receiver 1 in this class, like I got to be careful about making that bet a lot, right? I just sort of know as a rule that's a bad bet to have firm conviction on, right? Like that's a bet I don't want to have a ton of conviction on because I know that historically it hasn't been a good bet, and so like that. So again, I love the player. I'm not sure I'm going to love the cost.
Gotcha. And I
think he's in. I think if he's available at 9, I think it would be malpractice for Chicago not to take him.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and that's something you've been very consistent on, Jordan. Throughout the years is just that you're uncomfortable making that bet on those wide receivers. Like trying to, as you said, pick the best one out of the class.
It's my humility. It was taught to me by Dan. Humility.
Yes, humility definitely matters. But
I'll take all the JSN though, Dan. All of it.
All right,
all of it. I'm willing to make that bet.
All right, we gotta let JD do his thing here. So,
guys, you hear us talk about it often. The FFPC, the playground of fantasy land. This is where we play. The big boys play. The little guys play. It doesn't matter what your buy-in range is. You can start at $5. All the way to 10 grand. You've got Dynasty, redraft, best ball tournaments are flying right now. You see it on the screen. MyFFPC.com. They got the Fantasy Pros, $350 buy-in, $1 million grand prize. Yes, you heard it right. $1 million grand prize for the Fantasy Pros Championship, as well as the main event. 2 monster tournaments right there. You've got the 2 best ball tournaments, $35 buy-in and a $125 buy-in. The never too early. One is a super flex, one is a 1 QB. You've got a $5,000 grand prize and a $25,000 grand prize. Of course, you've got the Dynasty Orphans that Theo talked about. He's definitely in there buying and selling those bad boys. They're fun, guys. There's some serious discounts right now. Check it out, myffpc.com. If you're not already on that site, you can use the code GOAT to get an exclusive bonus when you sign up. You get a $25 bonus, guys, that you can use to a 35-plus entry. So again, for that $35 tournament for $5,000, you can use that $25 credit. It costs you $10, man, to get into this tournament. So check it out, myffpc.com. There's a link posted in the description below. Guys, let's go to Dallas, man. Let's go to Dallas. I know Dan and I are big on Brandon Cooks. We have him on a couple rosters. We were talking about him this weekend. He's kind of like the vagabond, right? Receiver of the NFL. He's been on a few teams now. He ends up in Dallas. He's given us 7 out of 9 seasons, at least as a top 24 receiver, basically as a wide receiver too. So let me ask you, Jordan, I'll go to you first. You see Kellen Moore is gone. Zeke is gone. There's an offensive transition going on in Dallas. How bullish are you on this offense? Where are you on Brandon Cooks? Do you like the kind of the fallout for the other pieces in Dallas? I saw a tweet you posted earlier on Dak. Maybe comment on that as well.
Love Dak Prescott. I've loved Dak Prescott for a while. I think he's like, again, we talk about profiles. Quarterback has led the league in offense, right? Quarterback that has put up, before he broke his leg, was on pace for like mind-boggling stats, right? I mean, like the best quarterback season of all time was on pace for that before that gruesome, horrible injury. Like elite performances throughout his career. We get bored, and like, I don't know, like that's what happens. And, then we want to put guys that are less proven and, at a position where, like, the one thing that's been consistently true is that high level performers stay high level for a really long time at the quarterback position. And so like, that's a bet that I want to consistently make. Right. So I'm pretty convinced on Dak Prescott going forward. Like that said, like if this is an opportunity to pivot to Josh Allen or Mahomes, I'm interested in exploring that cost. But you add in another guy, and again, I think like I'm a pretty, he's going around quarterback 10, right? Like that's a really good bet to make historically. So pretty bullish on that. Again, Cooks is my most owned wide receiver, most rostered wide receiver. So I'll probably whittle that down a bit, I would imagine, right? If I can sort of use him to, climb up at some other positions, something like that. I'm sure this is an opportunity to probably do it. But again, I think he's a season-long innings eater, so I'm fine putting him out there in my lineup. And I think that with the right roster construction, he will be a part of a winning team.
I like your Dak bet. I think that the fact that you add a wide receiver 2 who's going to command targets. And we should see less targets for the tight end position with, Schultz on his way out and Dak most likely having a younger tight end. I think the offense could be more explosive. You already go Pollard, you replace Zeke with Pollard. Pollard should see an uptick. You add Cooks and you take away Schultz. It looks like it's going to be a more explosive type plays for Dak, and I think it'll look good fantasy-wise.
I love that too. Like, do you want to pay $9 million for Dalton Schultz, or do you want to pay like $12 million for Brandon Cooks? Like, you'd always pick the wide receiver, right? That's always what you want for Dynasty too. Like you want the guy that's going to put up 2 yards per route run compared to 1.45 or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that's definitely the bet that you want. Yeah, I love that's a very astute observation.
And JD's going to win $25K with all his Jake Ferguson in FFPC best ball tournaments too. So
yeah.
I love it. Just trying to see which ones we knocked off. Let's go to running back a bit, man. Come on, we've got Jordan. He loves stacking those running backs. We've all seen his dynasty teams very weighted on the running backs. We've got 2 running backs, Jordan, David Montgomery and Miles Sanders, who were drafted 20 picks apart in 2019. They're both coming off of their rookie 4-year contract. Which one of these guys do you prefer? Do you prefer DeMont going to Detroit? Do you prefer Miles in Carolina? And why do you like that one guy more than the other, if you have a preference?
Yeah, it's a question of like what bet I want to make, I think. So Montgomery's going to be cheaper. It looks like, we haven't gotten a full cycle of drafts and everything to sort of tell us that, but it looks like he's going to be cheaper. I wonder what Sanders' ceiling is. Right, that's my concern about Sanders' ceiling. He just hasn't caught a lot of balls. He had 50 catches, and it's just dropped and dropped and dropped. He hasn't had more than 200 receiving yards since his rookie season. Like, Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell, those guys are involved in that passing offense. Like, that should probably speak to us to some degree. So that's one of my cautionary spots there with him. Is I don't know what the big ceiling is, especially if this is a team with a rookie quarterback that's going to be playing from behind. Right, like. I don't know. Like, I don't necessarily love that recipe for a run-centric running back. The problem I would have with that David Montgomery is DeAndre Swift's looming now, right? DeAndre Swift has had he had a 33 carry game a couple years ago. It was like 18 months ago, and I think he's had 4 or 5 games with double-digit carries since then. So if you sort of look at that, like how much, if you're David Montgomery, how much does DeAndre Swift scare you? I think from a dynasty lens, we think it's terrifying. However, like this is a big contract that they gave him. Like this is like a top 5 contract over the past 5 years for a running back type contract that they gave him. This is a big contract. Like you don't see contracts this big very often. By the way, Madison's contract at like just over $6 million guaranteed over 2 years. Like that's the second best running back contract in almost every class since like 2018. Like that's a huge contract, and Montgomery was almost double it in terms of guaranteed money. So I kind of look at it and I'm like, all right, David Montgomery's probably a threat. DeAndre Swift is probably a threat. However, he seems like he's worn out his welcome there. They make this big commitment to Montgomery. Are they in some sort of committee? Like, I don't know. But I think, like, ultimately, Montgomery can basically do everything. I don't think Sanders can do that. And Montgomery's in an offense that I think can be elite. And in an elite offense, I think he's capable of playing up to that level. Right? I think David Montgomery basically is capable of playing to the level of his offense. Right. So if that's a really good offense, right, I think he'll fit in fine. Right. If it's a really bad offense, I don't think he's going to elevate it. And so I think this could be a really good offense. And so I think at cost, like if I'm getting a discount on beneath Miles Sanders, I'd much rather have Montgomery.
Yeah, I don't know, Dan.
Totally
I know I'm not specifically excited about Sanders going to Carolina. Am I missing something, Theo?
So I'll take a devil's advocate approach on Sanders, is that we have seen him have a 50-catch season in his career, and Philadelphia kind of got away from it. But I think there's a decent offensive line in Carolina, and there's also opportunity for him to see targets finally. So I think that there's like I don't dislike either one of them, and I think it's okay to take I think you could make an argument for either one, and I think by the end of the day, I think their ADPs will be close to one another this season in redraft. Dynasty-wise, I think they're going to be relatively close with – I think you're right, though, Jordan. I think that the the fact that Swift is around, you get a slight discount on Montgomery from the dynasty perspective. But I don't dislike the Sanders situation. I think it's fine. It's a good offensive line, an opportunity for more volume and more targets. Obviously, we'll have less rushing touchdowns. But Montgomery, I think that you nailed it. I think it's like DeAndre Swift managers are painting themselves a picture, and I certainly have some Swift in Dynasty, and I believe in his talent. But like David Montgomery has had 155 receptions in his career, and I think people just kind of say, oh, he's going to take over the Jamal Williams role. It's going to be a completely different role. I think that he'll be used more as a complete back than, the between the tackles grinder that we saw Jamal. So I don't know. I can make a case for either, but I'm not bearish on Sanders. I think that he's a guy that I don't mind having on my dynasty teams as well. They both landed pretty well.
Dan, we know you're bullish. You've got your trade up on there. You're flexing one of your recent trades for two of your favorite running backs.
Yeah, really, they are. I mean, because I think, Jordan nailed it on Montgomery. All the signs point to he should have a good role, probably. I'm not expecting him to score 17 touchdowns necessarily like Jamal Williams, but, I think he's going to have a solid role in there. And James Conner is, they like him in Arizona. They really have no reason to draft a running back very high. So I think he's going to be very startable as well. And if you look at what Conner did when Kyler went out last year, Conner actually performed very, very well. So, basically what I did was I gave up a low first and a mid second to get those two players. And I threw in Darnell Mooney, which on the roster that I had him on, was a guy who really wasn't going to be starting for me hardly ever. So pretty much a throwaway wide receiver. But interested to get Jordan's thoughts on this one.
I dig it. One of the other things too is like you just point to the Theo, I think you kind of hit it with like if they wanted him to be the Jamal Williams role, like wouldn't they have brought back Jamal Williams at a cheaper cost?
Mm-hmm.
Right? They just had Jamal Williams, and they chose to let Jamal Williams walk out the door for close to $3 million less guaranteed. Jamal Williams made 3 for 12. I'm sure he would have taken 3 for 12 from Detroit. Detroit instead offered 3 for 18 for David Montgomery. Right. So I don't think Montgomery, again, this is March and we don't know, but I read that as we think Montgomery is capable of more than what Jamal Williams did last year. And honestly, I'm unreasonably a Jamal Williams guy. I've liked Jamal Williams since he came out. I met Jamal Williams. I'm a fan of Jamal Williams, but I think we could be honest with ourselves and to say that it was a really good situation last year. He probably broke down as the season went along. This signing in New Orleans probably isn't going to age well, would sort of be my assumption on it. And, I think with Montgomery, they probably see a guy that, they didn't throw the ball at Jamal Williams that much. And again, we've kind of hit on, Montgomery's capable of doing basically everything. Again, is he elite at anything? No, but he's maybe his best strength is that he can do everything and he can play a lot, and that's something that Swift hasn't done. And that's probably something they didn't see at Jamal Williams. And so if you're kind of projecting forward, that's a pretty interesting spot. And the other thing too, with Detroit, they haven't been in this situation for a while, but they're the favorites to win the NFC North right now. They're the betting line favorites. And what comes with that? Positive game script. What comes with that? A running back that's going to get touches when you're leading, right? They haven't been in a situation like this in a while where they're going to be playing from ahead, where they're projected to play from ahead. David Montgomery is more that guy than DeAndre Swift is. And so that's the other thing I would sort of point to. Swift has always been kind of he'll get a lot of passing game usage in a bad offense. They're in a spot now where they're going to be playing from ahead, I think. And so I think that's the other thing with Montgomery. It's going to be more Montgomery favorable game script.
I think there's also football people are football people. And when you see these guys going and getting a player from in the same division, I always think that speaks volumes because you have familiarity. The staff has familiarity. It's hey, I've seen this guy twice a year. That's the guy I want. That sort of thing happens in football. So, the fact that you're getting a Chicago Bear to come and play for Detroit, some people might say that's such a simplistic thought, but I really think there's some weight to be had with that.
For sure, man. They feel the pain more, Theo. You know what I mean? Like when Jamal Williams gets a touchdown over the Vikings, they feel that a bit more than if it's over the Browns or whatever, and they see it repeatedly, and then they're like, man, we got to pick up that kid if we get a chance,
And there was a million guys they could have replaced Jamal Williams with to have a thumper. They could have signed Deonta Foreman for less money. Damian Harris signed for nothing.
No, they wanted versatile.
They wanted a real complete back.
And not give away your offense, right? Like that's you want two backs that when they're there, that you got to keep that defense guessing, and Montgomery's definitely going to have that defense guessing a bit more than JW.
Jordan, I do have a question though. Like we're sitting here singing David Montgomery's praises, where you've got a guy, DeAndre Swift, who we've seen score. He's had his worst fantasy performance was 13 points per game. He's gone over 15 points per game, I believe, twice in 3 years. At what point does he become a guy you want to take on more of because the market's going to beat him up a lot because of the Montgomery landing spot?
Yeah, I want to see how this settles out a little bit, but it's will never not be funny to me that he's going to cost more. Like there are people that had Josh Jacobs, who was 3 for 3, who had produced a top 12 seasonal finish in his first 3 seasons, who had first round draft pedigree, who was the lead back, who had shown he could hold up to do that, who had receiving and rushing profile. And there were people that dropped him out of the top 20 of Dynasty rankings last year. Okay. Now we're sort of at a position where DeAndre Swift is none of those things. Right? He hasn't been able to hold up. He hasn't done rushing and receiving. He hasn't. He doesn't have the first round pedigree. He doesn't have contract insulation, and we're going to keep him in the mid-teens. Right? I find that to be fascinating, just from from what we're doing as dynasty GMs. If there's a 2 in front of him, right? I think that's really interesting. You get to a spot though, like, where you kind of are like looking at the board and you're like, all right, what type of bet do I want to make? Right. And I think it very much becomes that, right? Like DeAndre Swift or Ramondre Stevenson. Like I got to take Ramondre Stevenson there, right? Chubb or Swift. We talked about earlier, like Chubb this season could outproduce, kind of like the future of DeAndre Swift. Then you kind of get to Dobbins. Like, I don't know if I love that bet. Derrick Henry, again, kind of that similar Chubb type bet, but it's more of a 1-year deal. Like, what are you getting beyond? Like, what's a second contract for Swift look like? Right. That's the thing that's interesting to me. And I'm not necessarily sure on. Right. But you sort of get in there. Like, do you want to take a big swing on Derrick Henry this year, knowing kind of like I might not win beyond this year with that bet? Right. Pollard's kind of an interesting situational play that's probably better this year than Swift is, but you don't necessarily know what the future brings, and then you start getting down a little bit. Like there's only so far that he can really sink is, I guess, my bigger point. So like, I don't really have a problem if you want to go with a couple of those guys over him, but it's going to become a point like he gets to 17, 18, 19, of the veterans, you're going to put a couple of rookies in there as well, right? He starts to get to like 20. Like at that point, it's pretty interesting. Like I'd be curious to see how close he and Montgomery get, right? Because that's the thing that would be, because Montgomery's going to have multiple years of security, right? That matters at the running back position, or Swift doesn't, right? Like I don't know. I'm interested to see sort of how close they converge. I don't think Montgomery passes them, but that's it. Like we're sitting. You got
to think Swift ends up somewhere else, right?
With that next year, right?
Yeah. Swift is definitely going to be moving on next year.
Especially for him to blossom at this point, because he's like capped almost in Detroit.
Right. And looking at, again, at Keep Trade Cut, just to get a quick and dirty idea, they have Swift at running back 19, Montgomery at running back 25. And they have Swift as a tier 11 and Montgomery as a tier 13. As far as like overall dynasty players. So I don't know. I mean, I think it might just take a few good games for Montgomery and a few games of Swift getting 8-10 touches, and you could see that those two cross.
Swift just has a bit more sex appeal, Dan. That's all it is. He's the sexy name with the bit of flash. Montgomery's not.
Let's be honest. The name DeAndre Swift
Right.
sounds like a better running back than David Montgomery.
Exactly. And guys, I don't know if you heard, but breaking news today: Damian Harris goes to Buffalo. Do we care about this move? Is this going to be significant? Is he the next Singletary there? I don't know, Jordan. Do you have anything on this move for the New England running back going to Buffalo?
I've been sort of hypothetically hypothesizing this for months about that Buffalo would bring in a Damian Harris to be the complement to James Cook. I've used his name as being the guy. So I was I manifested it. It was in my AOD group chat. I was it actually happened. I love this for James Cook, right? I love this for James Cook, right? Because this isn't his brother, right? This isn't, and again, I have a chapter in a book that has Damian Harris's name in it. So I'm a Damian Harris guy. But I'm under no illusion that he's gonna take the receiving angle. Right? We haven't seen him hold up a ton, right? Again, he had I think he finished second in the league in rushing touchdowns a couple years ago, but he has never really cracked a huge rushing number. They're going to have more invested in James Cook. This is a 1-year prove-it deal. There wasn't a big market for him, right? All the things we kind of look at of hey, what's the NFL kind of think of a player? They didn't think much of him, right? He's been a free agent for a couple of weeks now, and now he signs a 1-year deal where the finances aren't disclosed. Right, that's not a good deal for the player. So, so I'm pretty bullish on James Cook because I don't think that this harms him substantially, and I think it's a good signal that they're not going to bring in someone better.
I think Jordan nailed it. I think that this is a James Cook signing. Devin Singletary, has gone over 800 yards rushing for the last 2 seasons. That's fine, but he's had 50 targets now for 3 straight years. If James Cook just absorbs those targets, I think he's going to be a useful player this year. I think he'll be, potentially even an RB2. They also haven't added a receiver that really scares you. So it's obviously he's got to dodge a lot of bullets in the draft, and he's got to dodge some more bullets, in terms of maybe they add a receiver that might take some targets. But I think if Buffalo's self-scouting, they're going to want to get their draft pick running back from last year more involved in the passing game. He's explosive. It's definitely interesting. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I think this actually looks really good for Cook. Just because it kind of, I think, makes it less likely that they're going to do something crazy like go Bijan, and trade up or something like that. You definitely wouldn't want to see a Jahmyr Gibbs go there. Charbonnet was probably the one that would worry me the most out of what we think we know about how the NFL is going to draft. But I think it's great for Cook, and I do like it for Harris too, just because he's going to be on a better offense. Concerns about whether he can hold up or not, but on a better offense, yeah, I like it. He did well enough for New England, and so I'll take a chance on him because again, if anything happens to Cook, then all of a sudden you're looking at even more play for Damian Harris. I mean, I think Nyheim Hines would kind of jump into the Cook role a little bit, but I think Harris would also get a slice of that. So it's pretty good stuff. It's just the main thing you have to keep in mind is Josh Allen to this point has been kind of their goal line back. They keep saying they don't want to do that anymore, but we haven't yet seen it. So hopefully this will be the year where they say, yeah, we're going to let Harris take those plunges.
It's funny, the game on the line. It's easy to to get back to your habits when you've got one of the best rushing quarterbacks of all time.
Yep, exactly.
2021, guys, Damian Harris with 15 touchdowns was still only the running back 18. So you got to think going to Buffalo, like you said, this is good news for James Cook. And the savvy guys are out there putting offers for James Cook right now, trying to buy him at a bit of a discount, right? Whenever these moves happen. So thank you, NFL, for keeping the goodness coming with these signings. Guys, we got to finish this off. We'll stay in New England, talk about a New England guy, but we'll go to the tight end position. We are talking FFPC mostly. We mostly all play tight end premium leagues. One guy we were high on, I made a move for actually Swift and Gesicki. thinking Gesicki might end up in a place like Dallas. What are your thoughts with Gesicki going to New England, Jordan? Is he going to be is he closer to like the next Gronk, or is he like the next, RIP Jonnu Smith out there in Patriots land?
Mike Gesicki is a great, good stats, bad team guy, right? Doesn't really separate, doesn't break tackles, and is kind of when you don't have a lot of great other options, Gesicki looks pretty good in a passing offense. But if you have a lot of good options, kind of like what happened last year, he's not very good. So I think it's a great landing spot because there's not a lot there to sort of take the attention away. And, if Gesicki's going to run a lot of routes, right, there's nothing to really stop that. And that I think will ultimately add up. Right. If he went to a spot where there was like a couple of really good wide receivers, exactly like he was last year, I think he looks very ordinary, right? From a quarterback dropping back to pass where they want to throw the ball, right? He's constantly covered and he doesn't do anything after the catch. He's a really high contested catch rate, right? He just doesn't get open. And so that's a formula for a bad offense to throw it to a player a lot. It's not a formula for a good offense. So it's actually great because I think the Patriots offense, there's not a lot of guys that are going to take a lot of attention away and be big time separators. So I think it's a good spot for him.
Yeah, I like the spot. I like the spot, JD, as well. It's that's also the coach that recruited him to Penn State, O'Brien. So he reunites with the coach he has familiarity with, who's now the offensive coordinator, and he had 70 plus catches in 2021. Another in division guy. So it's like Bill Belichick has seen Mike Gesicki for these years and says, hey, I think I could do better with that guy than his coaches. And, to talk about Mac Jones again, Mac Jones, I think, is a winner this offseason as well. He gets Juju Smith-Schuster replacing Jacoby Myers, and he gets Mike Gesicki replacing Jonnu Smith. So he's added 2 more capable receivers. And, I think it's fine for Gesicki. I think he can certainly see his fair share of targets in that offense, and I think he can potentially get back, over 55 receptions this year.
Dan, Theo stole my question to you. That's what I was going to ask you, how that helps your Mac Jones shares. But I think we can all agree he's gotten some nice little pieces, nothing too flashy, but enough to help him, right, Dan?
Yeah, definitely. And, he's actually, Gesicki, somebody I picked up just a couple of days ago after that move was made. I picked up in an FFPC Dynasty, I picked up Gesicki for a future third, basically, nice. And then I swapped my 4th rounder for a 5th rounder, which is basically nothing at all in FFPC, especially at the end of the 4th round where I was drafting. So
especially with cuts coming.
Yeah, so it's basically I got that, I got Gesicki for real cheap, I thought, and if nothing ever happens, all I really gave up was a 3rd rounder, and if he does well, I can hopefully flip him and move him on.
Guys, you see 1912, smash that like if you like what you hear. We're trying to help you guys get that edge, unlock your dynasty game, take it to the next level, right? You're watching fantasy football shows this time of year, especially tuning into the GOAT District. We want to make you better. That's what we're hoping to do tonight with Jordan here. We had a trade question. Why don't we get to it with from 1912? I appreciate 1912 and all the goodness he brings to the show, especially in the chat. He sent the 108 and Sky Moore for 106 and 206.
Yep, and that is super flex.
And it's super flex. Dan did a bit of investigating for us. Him and the intern were back there working hard behind the scenes. Jordan, what are your thoughts on the trade sending 108 and Sky Moore for 106 and 206 in a super flex?
I think this probably jumps you into a tier, and I think this probably puts you in the quarterback conversation, which I think is probably valuable, right? I don't know. I'm curious what you guys think. I don't have a great sense of this. Like, in what percentage of your leagues do you think a quarterback's available at 106, right? A top 10 quarterback. Let's assume that the top 4 guys in this class, Richardson, Stroud, Levis, and Bryce Young, they all go in the top 10 of the NFL draft. What's the odds there you're sitting at 6 and a quarterback's available?
I think it's good. I think it's good because I think
you're like 80+%, right?
Right.
The top 7 is the tier this year for Superflex.
Will Levis, Will Levis will probably be the guy. Unless obviously the draft will change, some. But as is now, it feels like Levis will be the one that drops. That could possibly. I have 105 and 106 in a triflex, and I'm curious to see what falls to me there.
1912 crushed it on this one, fellas.
Yeah, I agree. I like it a lot.
Yeah,
because
I would do it without the 206. To be honest with you,
yes,
based on how the tier is shaping up and the chances of getting, like, your worst case scenario. Let's say it's Bijan and then 4 quarterbacks, which I don't think it'll be in most Superflex leagues. Then you're talking about Jahmyr Gibbs or Jackson Smith and Jigba. Exactly. Where you get to that 108, it's a little bit sneakier where there's a little bit more indecision right now.
There's a good chance you're making a decision into that next tier, which is like the worst place to be. Right?
You crushed it 1912. Nice humble brag trade in the GOAT District chat.
Very, very nicely done. I was offered in a 1 QB. I'm in a Reno mode. I was offered the one. What was this? Just along these lines: 112, 111, and 110 for my 102.
112, 111, and what was the third pick?
So basically 110, 111, and 112 for 102.
I probably would still stick with the 102.
Yeah. And this was Triflex, right?
No, this is a 1 QB. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I would probably stick with the 102. You could make an argument for JD. It's a tough one.
I think it's easier to put the 102 in a deal for an elite player that you can't put those other picks in. That if we're going to sort of stick and pick there, right? I think your bet's probably still the 102. You could, if it was super flex, maybe those picks, the later first, become a little bit more interesting. Maybe you're picking 2 guys the same tier, kind of like what I was talking about before. Maybe you're picking 2 guys the same tier. And start 1, I don't think that's the case. And in start 1, 102 plus, might get you a really good player, right? It might get you, you could be in a conversation of, like we talked about before, right? Could you go Olave? Could you go London? Those are players that are available that I don't think packaging 110 and 111 is going to get you. That's just my take on it.
And JD, I think
you could put 102 and Pittman together, and you could probably get Olave or anybody, London.
And JD, I think a manager that's willing to offer you those 3 picks right now, when you're on the clock in your FFPC draft, he's going to be willing to, or they are going to be willing to send you those 3 picks plus, because you always see the craziness when you're OTC in these FFPC leagues. So I would just hold tight, my friend.
So Diddy,
that's a trade that never goes away, right? That doesn't go away, right? You can sit on, you're in the bargaining position, and that trade never gets worse than it is right now.
Yeah, shout out to our boy P. Diddy. He's in the GOAT Leagues. He sent me that earlier today. I thought it was an interesting one. He every once in a while he'll make me think. Usually I just kind of.
That's generous for P. Diddy.
That is very generous for Diddy.
Might be the most fair trade that P. Diddy's ever offered in a GOAT League.
Hopefully he doesn't hate me for throwing it out there. Jordan, man, it's always a blast having you on. You have such a unique approach to the game and just so much insight. It's, we could go on forever, dude. We're at 90 plus minutes already. We've taken more than enough of your time. You've been more than generous. Remind the people of all the goodness over there at Analytics of Dynasty and all the goodness you're dropping at Football Guys.
Real quick before I do that, question for you guys. So I just posted this on Twitter. Buffalo lost Devin Singletary and added Damian Harris. How does that impact James Cook's value? I gave an option of increase his value or decrease his value. What do you want to guess the split is on that?
Decrease is probably more.
I'm guessing it's close to 50-50 on your poll, because I've seen the pro Damian Harris argument. I'm guessing it's close to 50-50.
I say it's probably like 60 some early 60s in favor of Hurts it.
It should be like 70-30 James Cook, because a receiving back getting more targets literally increases his value. But
I'm gonna go 75-25 Hurts it.
Yeah, it was 61% so far Hurts it, which is wild to me. By the way, this is a team that ran the 10th most routes.
Did you say 65 Hurts it?
61% Hurts. Yeah, 61%.
Nailed it. I said early 60s.
You're right.
Nailed it.
By the way, that's a team that ran the 10th most routes per dropback last year for running backs, and only managed the 21st most receptions per dropback. So that's how sort of negative of an influence Devin Singletary is on a passing game. All right. So with that, all that aside, I do want to thank you guys for having me on. Yeah, go ahead and check out Analytics of Dynasty, the Dynasty team building guide. You can get it. Again, I'll take you all through all this kind of from beginning to end. There's stuff in there that I'm super proud of as well. I committed to I'll just share two things. I committed to putting everything kind of I knew about Dynasty on one page, which there's the old saying, like, I'm sorry I couldn't write you a shorter letter. I didn't have enough time. Like, that took me an immense, like, I wrote a 150-page book, and the amount of time it took me to get all that stuff on one page was like just an obscene amount of time. So I'm super proud of that one. The other thing I'm really proud of is, someone was asking me, like, how do you know if a Dynasty analyst is good? I said, well, there's a couple of ways. You can kind of see, what their teams look like, what their ROI is. Are they productive? The other thing is their subscribers can tell you. And so I had a couple of my subscribers who I've sort of seen all along their Dynasty journey write chapters for me. And the stuff that they did in their chapters, I think it was great. I think the work that they put in was amazing on their teams. I think they did an awesome job of explaining it, of sort of showing the process behind it. I'm super proud of them, and I'm super proud of what they were able to accomplish in this book. And so, like, those are really the pitches that I have. It's a lot of case study stuff. And then there's a lot of theory stuff too, right? There's metrics to look at. There's everything that can help you from the top to bottom in your Dynasty league. So go ahead and check that out. And again, if you're looking for 360 plus podcasts a year, a subscription over to analyticsofdynasty.com will get that for you. Our Dynasty trade database, that real draft position tracker, my Dynasty tiers, which I just updated, and all the like over there. So you can get all of that. Subscribe to analyticsofdynasty.com.
Guys, check out Jordan. It's a must. It's a must if you're playing Dynasty fantasy. Theo, what do you have coming up, man? You're all over the place. Help the people focus on you. Come on.
Well, I'm on tomorrow on the Sonic Truth Dynasty podcast with Alan Soslavsky and Matt Kelly. And then Billy Musi and I are putting out 2 first-class fantasies this week. And then I'm back with you guys. Next week, we have Dalton Cates, who's a great guest. He's been in the GOAT District now. I think this might be his 4th time. And we're going to talk a little bit about this rookie class and react to some of these free agent signings and trades. You're not going to want to miss that one.
Yeah, he's awesome. Dan, you and I just did a Ballin' Live this past weekend with our boy Kevin Wheeler. We're going to be doing those weekly, guys. So if you're into best ball, we're going to be doing some FFPC best ball tournaments. We're going to be doing a bunch of different platforms, mainly the FFPC, but we'll sprinkle in a little bit here and there to give some variety. And Dan, you and I might get together once a week and maybe do some Dynasty chatting and strategizing. A little bit more to come with that, but just a bit of a teaser. But you see, guys, we've got you covered, whether it's Dynasty, fantasy, redraft, big tournaments, small 12-man leagues, home leagues. Doesn't matter what fantasy football you're playing, we've got you covered here at the GOAT District. Hopefully you hang with us all off season. We appreciate you guys hanging with us tonight. Check you all later.
GOAT District, the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text. That trash offer's the best. You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.